when we should examine one's light. Not only will we acknowledge an intelligence, but we will also discover the DNA which connects us all as one. Welcome to Light Insight with Hillis Pugh, where we dive into the mind's light. Only on Real Revolution Radio X.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Light Insight, where we dive into the mind's light. And today I am super excited to have our featured guest, Carl Calleman. And the book we'll be discussing today is called The Quantum Science of Psychedelics. I'm really excited about this book. I've read a lot of it, and I think you all will find it interesting. And so a little bit about Carl. Carl Johan Calleman was born in Stockholm, Sweden. He received a PhD in physical biology from the University of Stockholm in 1984 and was a senior researcher at the Department of Environmental Health at the University of Washington in Seattle. He has served as an expert on chemical carcinogens for the World Health Organization, and articles he has authored and co-authored have been quoted more than 1,600 times in the scientific literature paper. He is recognized as a world authority in the mind calendar and has written 7 books about this topic. But today we're going to be discussing his latest book, which is available now, The Quantum Science of Psychedelics. Hi, Carl, and welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on the show today.
Hi, Hillis. Great to be with you. Thank you for having me on your show.
So I just want to really dive into this because, as I mentioned in the introduction, that your book, The Quantum Science of Psychedelics, being a person who has taken psychedelics, mostly plant medicine, DMT, ayahuasca, it is really interesting the way that you've put all this information together in this book to make it really cohesive. And I will say that anyone who picks up this book, it's not one of these books you can just read in a couple of weeks. This is one of these books that you have to take your time to really understand the psychology behind it. And so, Carl, one of the first questions that I have for you, and you talk about it in your book about the quantum psychedelics, is that when it comes, and this is a quote from the book, it says, when it comes to the model to use for understanding psychedelics, thinkers in the field have essentially divided into 2 different groups. One side is the mainstream science, which is the basis on the assumption that consciousness is generated by the human brain. It is, in this view, everything that happens in a psychedelic state goes on in a person's head has no longer a higher cosmic or spiritual origin. On the other side, there are those who believe that the mind-brain is a reducing valve for cosmic consciousness that exists independently of the human being. In this view, psychedelic substances have the power to remove this valve and create a resonance on another frequency, which creates an altered state. Up until now, this view has, however, been presented mostly as philosophical concept with a little scientific evidence to support it. And that's a mouthful to really understand what happens inside the brain when you are exposed or connect to this plant medicine energy. So how would you define the consciousness in relation to the quantum state and psychedelics? Meaning, you have the quantum energy and you have the psychedelic component. How would you define those two energies and their relation to one another?
Yeah. So this book basically has two parts. The first part is really to develop how quantum theory on a macrocosmic level explains our entire existence, and the various quantum shifts that the cosmos have gone through is really a source of explanation to how everything in the universe has evolved. And that evolution includes the human evolution. In other words, human evolution, and this is very much based on ancient thoughts and especially the Mayan thoughts. Human evolution in all of its aspects comes back to an evolving quantum field. And in short, we've gone through 9 different quantum levels, and we've come to the top of that particular level. And then this is a completely different worldview, I think, from what most people have. In this worldview, our minds, how we look on reality and all aspects of reality actually comes out of what you might call creation waves, quantum waves that we download. And in particular, our brains download these waves in order to create the mind. So the mind is not something that we create from inside, so to speak. It's something that we download. And this is very different from, I must say, from established science. But today, you meet a lot of people that say that they downloaded some kind of information. In other words, they are aware of the fact that some of what their minds are producing actually has an origin in the cosmos. It's something they download. And then the question then is, how do psychedelics come into this big picture? And that's really what comes in the second half of the book, basically starting with the chapter on shamanism and going on to the chapter on psychedelics and so forth. And really what the psychedelics do is that they change this resonance. They change this reception of these cosmic waves that form our minds. And that's the basic thought. And then in the second half of the book, there is sort of a detailed description of how these psychedelics interact with the brain in order to change the reception frequency of these brains. And as that happens, we come to experience reality very, very differently. And that's what happens in the shamanic or the psychedelic state, as you like.
That's very wonderful in how you put this explanation together and how you really simplified it step by step. But the part that really fascinated me, because, one, being a holistic practitioner, where I practice Reiki, I do energy work, I do all these things, and I'm connected to this quantum energy, I'm connected to the universe, I'm connected to other things as I step in and doing this energy. And you talked about downloads and activating these centers and doing this other, having another connection. And I know that you talk about in the book, about shamanism and how it works and how it's connected to the quantum energies. But what I want to know is, what is the relationship between the pineal gland and psychedelics? Because you talked about downloading this information and other people receive this information that's outside of themselves. So how is actually the quantum energy connected to the pineal gland to the experience of psychedelics?
Yes, that's an important question. And you might say that the pineal gland has been somewhat of a controversial topic from a scientific standpoint. It was believed for a long time by ancient traditions that this is where the mind and the souls and the body are connected. And it's a belief, for instance, in the Eastern traditions of India, Buddhism and Hinduism, so to speak, that the pineal gland represents a kind of a third eye with which we can look into another reality under certain conditions. If we have, as you mentioned here, practiced different kinds of healing and spiritual practices. Then, most famously in the Western tradition, the Frenchman Descartes suggested that the pineal gland is where the mind and the body meet, but the reason he said so is really that the pineal gland is it's at the center of the head. It's the center of the brain. And it's also the only unpaired component of the brain. So then there was no real, you might say, explanation to why this would play such an important role. And today in science, usually people connect the pineal gland with the fact that it determines the wake-sleep cycle. It sends out the hormone melatonin that makes you sleep when it gets dark, basically. Now, what I'm saying here, and then I'm coming from a different perspective from established science. What I'm saying is that the pineal gland is the anchoring point when we download the mind from the cosmos. So coming back to the same thing that we talked about earlier, I don't believe that the mind is a product of the brain. I believe that the mind comes out of an interaction of cosmic waves with the brain. And now that interaction, these waves, and that's what the ancient peoples would talk about as cosmic serpents, as plumed serpents, and which is kind of a natural way of talking about a wave, because that's a serpent represents a wave-like movement. And so if you want to have a metaphor for a wave, the best thing you can think of in nature would be a serpent. And there are all these traditions from ancient times that talk about serpents as the great creator gods. And they create by interacting with us. These waves, we download them. Now, but they don't go straight from the cosmic center to our brains. They go via a number of systems, including our own Earth. And so our brains are really then, you might say, microcosms of the whole planet. As you know, our brains, we have a left hemisphere of our brain and a right hemisphere of our brain, and those two hemispheres they are taking information from the western and the eastern hemispheres of our planet. And now in the planet there is a center. So that is crystalline. And this is very established. It's crystalline. It's made up of hexagonal crystals of iron and nickel atoms. Now, the same thing with the pineal gland. It has crystals in it. These are calcite crystals, hexagonal calcite crystals. And so what I believe is that our heads, our brains are downloading information from the whole planet, which ultimately come with these waves from the cosmic center. And then the pineal gland is the central anchoring point of this global mind. So that's why interactions, for instance, of psychedelics with the pineal gland may open us up to other resonances with these cosmic waves.
That's amazing. I love how you broke it down like that and how we receive this information. And would you say that when we are in our physical sleep cycle, or even in a plant medicine experience, which can simulate some sort of sleep cycle, would you say that this download process, this receptivity of information is happening at that time?
I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly.
So, as you talked about the pineal gland and the sleep that happens for us to receive the download of information, will you say that the sleep cycle, the physical sleep cycle, as if we're physically sleeping, or in the ayahuasca or plant medicine experience that duplicates or resembles the sleep experience, would you say that most of the downloads of information and the connection to the cosmic mind, as you put it, is happening at that time?
Yes. I think there is this mind that we download, and that's the center of this mind is anchored in the pineal gland. And I think that process is related to the sleep-wake process. In other words, when we go asleep, I think we disconnect from the mind. The mind goes out. And the mind, as I'm talking about here, is really then a particular mind, a mind that is very, the rational mind, the structured geometric mind that we're using to solve problems in our daily wake-up life. But then when we fall asleep, I think we disconnect. This geometric rational mind is disconnected from our brains, and which means that we become open for influences that are not as normally structured. And that's what happens also when you are taking psychedelics. The normal geometric structuring of the mind is disengaged. And, it's a fairly well-known phenomenon, talking about this sleep-wake cycle, that people have good ideas right before they're waking up. There are these stories about Edison, the inventor, about how he would sit there always on the verge of falling asleep. He created a situation where he would barely fall asleep and then wake up. And he did so in order to get the great ideas. And that's the same thing, really. I think there is a time there that a lot of people have experienced right before they wake up, or in the process of waking up when they've been asleep, when they get great ideas. And the reason is that when you're in sleep, the structured mind is not downloaded, it's not affected. You download that as you get awake. But then, right then, in this wake-up movement, then the structuring comes back, and that means that whatever influences you had from the cosmos when you were asleep, you have the chance to structure them and make them palpable in the physical world that we live in the wake-up state. And so I think that's the reason that Edison and several others, I think Tesla as well, several other inventors, they use this being on the verge of between, on the limits between wake up and sleep states. And that has very much to do with how the mind is downloaded to the brain in your wake up state.
I love that. And I just want to read a quote from your book that will also help further the explanation that you have. And the quote reads, "Everyone who downloads the same quantum wave has his or her reality organized by the same geometry. And this is why, for the most part, we are able to understand what other people experience, even if we have not directly shared those experiences. Hence, when several people share an experience of reality based on resonance with the same particular wave, they are living in the same world created by particular quantized geometry of the mind." And I just love how you elegantly put that, because it just brings to my mind when we have deja vu moments, or when we have a thought of someone and someone calls and reaches out to us, or even when having shared experiences in plant medicine ceremonies. I've sat down in many circles after my experiences, and when we share our experiences in the morning, that we all have similar, if not like, experiences because of how the shaman guides us through the night, and how we have common things we wish to work on. And so this really brings to my mind to question is that in our quantum energetic field of the physical body, meaning our aura, the energy that we emanate daily, and is the mind. So can you really just go a little bit deeper here and really explain to the listeners what's the difference between the cosmic mind and the physical brain, the mind that's in the physical body, and how it receives and stores the energies from higher sources?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think the best starting point to explain that is the fact that I look upon the mind basically as a geometry that compartmentalizes our experiences. And one of the most clear expressions of that geometry is the fact that there is a plane that separates our left and the right brain halves. And this is something that nobody questions. It's beyond dispute. But then, the question is, where does this separation of brain halves come from? you can't find it in the actual brain substance. There's no difference in the gray matter on your left brain half from your right brain half. You can't chemically or biologically see that there is a difference between those two brain halves. So what that tells us is that this distinction between the functions of the left and the right brain halves is not something that's embedded in the brain. It's not generated by the actual physical brain. Instead, what I'm saying here is that this separation of the left and right brain half, and there's many other separations between, the parietal and the frontal lobes, for instance, that's also based on a kind of geometry that separates different compartments of the brain. So then, where does this separation of brain halves, where does this separation of compartments in the brain come from? And that's what I say is the geometry of the mind. And that particular geometry is what we download. And as we download that geometry, our minds are, our experience is being compartmentalized. Now, what happens when you take psychedelics is that you decompartmentalize this. And so you return to a more basic quantum state of the mind. And that opens you up, and that may also open up a whole group, as you're mentioning, maybe in an ayahuasca ceremony or something like that. They're all resonating with some cosmic influence from these waves. And I should say these waves are not sort of just something I'm making up to fill in a gap. In this book, they're very, very thoroughly verified from the history of the universe and the history of humanity and so forth. These waves are real, and I say that we have to understand that these waves are real and learn about them in order to help us evolve to higher quantum states of the future. But anyway, that geometry then is what separates the brain, and then you can talk about the result as the mind. So there is I'm not saying that there is consciousness, the experience of consciousness without the brain, but I am saying that this the way that we experience reality is very much a result of a mind that we have downloaded, and that downloading is what creates the compartmentalization of the brain, which in terms is what determines why we experience reality in the particular way that we do.
Beautiful. I love how you broke it down and really allowed for the information to really take hold and really, give us a defining moment of oneness, but yet togetherness, and separation, but still oneness. And so with that, we are going to separate and come right back after this commercial break with more from Carl Calleman from his book, The Quantum Science of Psychedelics. And we'll be right back.
Whether it's coming from the world of entertainment, integrative medicine, quantum theory, conspiracy fact, ancient archaeology, sacred geometry, financial trends, or perhaps even from the very world of self-help and motivational speaking, Real Revolution Radio possesses the information you need. Listen today to our daily inspiring lineup of podcast radio talk shows, only on RealRevolutionRadio.com.
today to the Marine Show, where we will introduce you to the world of alternative remedies. Join Marine Pisani as she hosts discussions with leading experts in the fields of hypnotherapy, acupuncture, yoga, Ayurveda, EFT, chronic healing, integrative medicine, and so much more. Maureen will also brave topics that many consider taboo. Yes, taboo talk. Tune in today to The Marine Show, heard on popular social media and now on Smart TV. A mindfulness radio production only on RealRevolutionRadio.com.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cleveland, we now have liftoff to a higher level of consciousness. Tune in to RealRevolutionRadio.com, the #1 source for independent music and inspirational podcast radio. Awaken, evolve, inspire, and join the evolution only on RealRevolutionRadio.com.
You're listening to RealRevolutionRadio.com. There's hope as long as you're alive.
And we are back to keep diving deep and just really having to understand the science behind psychedelics and why it affects us the way that it does. And Carl, as I read this book, I couldn't help but to notice how you really tied the quantum energy into the psychedelics and really how it really affects just not us physically but also energetically as well. So one of the things that came to my mind was, can you really go a little bit deeper and explain to us what's the shift that happens with the quantum states and how it correlates to the use of psychedelics? Is it how often we use psychedelics? Is it like a one-time thing? Can you really help us, define that?
Okay. So I'm basing this macrocosmic quantum theory pretty much on the views of the ancient Maya. Those views were shared by a lot of ancient peoples who would sometimes build pyramids or pagodas that reflected the quantum shifts. In other words, they were built as terraces. And the way they looked upon this, the evolution of the universe, was really that it went through a sequence of quantum shifts. And so, especially if you go to Mexico or Guatemala, you will find a lot of pyramids that are built in 9 levels, like 9 terraces. And you might say that each of these terraces then reflect a certain quantum state. And quantum shifts are not gradual, slow changes. Quantum shifts are like going from one level to another. And that is what they would symbolize by building their pyramids like in terrace forms. Now, some of these quantum states, they have different functions in the overall evolution of humanity. And you might say there is one, the 6th level, that really compartmentalizes the human mind, that really separates everything. And that's really the quantum state that has created our civilization roughly about 5,000 years ago, that was activated. And then you can see this great change in many parts of the planet where civilizations emerged. That's because people then started to download a new quantum state, and one that is analytical, separating, and so forth. So it's a great thing for creating all the physical reality of a civilization. The problem with that, at least from our modern standpoint, is that very separation has also created a lot of pain in the history of humanity. It has created dominance. Some people dominate others. It's created sexism, racism, and what have you, different ways of separating people, because people have been downloading a mind on that quantum state that has created separation. And so overall, throughout these 5,000 years, people have been quite brutal. People have used power to dominate others, and so forth. Now, that's one of these quantum states. And then when you climb to higher levels, there is, for instance, the one that was most recently activated, the ninth quantum state, is sort of an opposite to that. It's a unity consciousness. It doesn't separate. And as I have come to understand the cosmic plan, and I think the Mayan calendar really is the only one that provides a coherent cosmic plan for us to relate to. The whole purpose of this highest wave, this highest quantum state, is for us to be able to return to a state of unity, to a state of oneness. And I would also say that only if you study these different quantum states, and that's really spelled out quite in detail in this particular book, only if you study those will you really understand how things fit together, and that ultimately, despite all the hardships that humanity has gone through, the whole ideal is that for us to return to that quantum state of unity. And so the reason that we're having you might say, a psychedelic revival at the current time, we've had that for maybe a decade or so, and you could also see an early wave of psychedelics in the 60s that in some ways were quite immature and really didn't have the kind of sense of sacredness that I think a lot of people will have today. But the reason that that's there is that it will facilitate for us to enter this ninth quantum state, which is the highest one. At least temporarily, all the separation that is created in our minds from this sixth wave, this sixth quantum state, all of those separations are being disengaged. They are the brain is decompartmentalized, and so what means that since psychedelics will effect such a decompartmentalization of the mind, it means that you, as an individual, will be able to see connections, to open up yourself, your mind, and at least temporarily you won't be able to shut things away like you have been maybe with this separating mentality. And that's just it doesn't change yourself forever. But it does give you a view into this unified reality where there is not separation. And then once you're out of that particular state, which, it depends on what kind of substance or plant medicine you're using, once you're out of that, you will have the possibility to use your insights, use your experience of a decompartmentalized brain, use that in order to learn how you are to go through to continue in your normal life a little bit less compartmentalized, so to speak, a little bit more oneness related, and that, but it doesn't come automatically, I think, but you can choose to take that path.
Yep, it's all about integration. We have to allow for the energy, the messages that we have received, and really allow that time to really integrate them into our daily practice once we understand what it is that we have received, because they pretty much show up in different ways, whether it's through dreams, through, messages from spirits, and anyone who is here to assist us on this path. And so I know that you talked about the Maya and you wrote, several books about them. So I'll have a lot more questions, and hopefully we can get to a few more of them. But how has the Maya outlined quantum theory? I know that you used studied the calendar system. So is it based on the calendar system? What is it really connected to, and how they outline the quantum theory? Is it through the 9 waves?
Yes, it is as simple like that. In other words, they would build these pyramids in 9 levels. So the most important Mayan temple sites, like Palenque, like Chichen Itza and Tikal. I recently, a couple of weeks ago, I visited one in Mayapan. The central pyramids are built like this in 9 steps. They're 9-level pyramids. And that by itself implies that they looked upon evolution as a quantum phenomenon, that evolution was driven by quantum shifts. And so then somebody would say, well, the Maya, they're just one of a million different ancient peoples. Why should we listen to them? Well, there is a very important reason to do that.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yes, there is. And the reason is that they left behind a calendar system that is sort of mathematically expressed. And if you think of science, real science really have to be based on mathematics, on numbers, so to speak. And the Maya, I would say, are the only ones that did so. Not totally, but basically no other ancient people did study reality with that kind of a mathematical detail as they did. And then when there are in the Mayan sources, there are descriptions of what they associated with these quantum shifts. And so, for instance, there was in the year 3115 BC, which is the beginning of the so-called long count of the Maya, the chronology that they would be using when they had a culture or civilization themselves. There is a description of that as a geometric change, as a downloading of a partitioning of the planet. And as if you believe, like I do, that we are resonance units for the planet, that means that if the Earth was partitioned in according to a certain geometry at that particular time, so would our minds be, or our brains would be partitioned according to the same geometry. And what happens when there is a change in this downloading of a geometry at a particular quantum state is that people start to think completely differently, and they get new abilities, and they might lose all abilities. But suddenly people started to build pyramids, which is really metaphors for a new geometry that's being downloaded. And that didn't happen before 5,000 years ago. And so that's the reason that I'm going back to the Maya. It's because they describe these quantum states and that they time them, they place them in time. And what that in turn means is that it allows us to correlate what we know happened in human history at various times and correlate that with the different quantum states that the nine-storied pyramids are symbols of.
Beautiful. I love how you explain it. And it just really brings me to my next point that I've had. And, one who teaches and practices the spiritual law of vibration, which the spiritual law of attraction is coming out of. You mention in your book, and I quote, quantum states generate potentialities, and their manifestations are unalterable. With that statement, and with your knowledge of the quantum states and what we talked about so far today, do you believe or feel that the spiritual law of vibration is somehow in relation to this particular quantum state that generates potentialities and their manifestations are unalterable?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that these waves that the Maya described and that they symbolized by serpents. Serpents, they're not real serpents, but they are living waves, you might say. And each of those has a particular frequency. And I believe that when people talk about being, having the same vibes and being on the same frequency as somebody else, it just means that they are in resonance with the same waves coming in from the cosmos. As I mentioned, there are 9 different waves coming in from the cosmos to create our reality. But then some of us will resonate more with some of these waves and others with other waves. And in particular, there will be people that, spiritually attuned people will usually be in resonance with the 9th wave, which is about a return to the state of unity. And then if you meet somebody else that you feel you like the vibes of that person, or you resonate with that person, it simply means that the two of you are downloading or are resonating with the same cosmic waves that have the same frequency. I forgot what the question what
no, but you answered it, though.
Yeah, okay, good. I thought so.
You completely answered it. And I have time for one more question for you. So, I guess, after hearing the quantum science behind psychedelics, and, there's always these arguments of how beneficial it is and how it can be hurtful. It's always this debate about it. And so in your book, you mention, again, taking a psychedelic is not taking a pharmacological substance that has some direct effect on the biochemistry of the neurons. Rather, as it changes the whole relationship between the brain and has a multitude of consequences, and so the healing mechanism can be understood in different ways. So in short, can you briefly, explain to us why psychedelics are healing? Yeah,
I think this is a good chance for me to really repeat what I said earlier, that what happens, in our normal default state of mind is very much influenced by this 6th wave, the one that created civilization, but also created separation. And that separation means that we will tend to compartmentalize out things that we don't want to see, you might say. We don't want to experience those things. Now, however, if you want to be a whole person, you have to face whatever that is stopping you from that you want to shut out, so to speak. And then what I'm saying here is that what the psychedelics do is that they decompartmentalize the mind, and meaning that everything gets to be there. Not only the light, sometimes you will have pure experience of light, and that will be sort of healing because it gives you this feeling that there is a good source of everything. But there is also these other things that are being shut out by your default mind, all the dark sides, you might say, all these things that you do not want to face because they are painful, and maybe you built your life on shutting something out from childhood, or doesn't have to be from childhood, but it could be other kind of things. And then once the mind is decompartmentalized, you'll have to face this. And that allows for a potential healing. And what has changed when it comes to psychedelics? There are many things that have changed in the past decade, but one of the things that have come out of 10 years of research, or maybe 20 years of recent research, is all of these studies from very respected, reputable scientific universities and institutions that have proven that the effects of psychedelics are in the right circumstances may be very healing. Certain kinds of things are particularly easily healed, you might say, and those are things like addictions, depressions, obsessive compulsive behaviors, and I would say anything that any mental disorder or disturbance, maybe we should talk about, that keeps people stuck in some kind of a rut. Those things can be helped by psychedelics. And I'm not saying that as from my own experience. I'm referring in this book to all the scientific studies that have been performed to demonstrate that this is actually the case. And why is it then, that those particular things that are can be healed, that are based on people being stuck in a rut? Well, it is because exactly what I've been saying here. It's because the psychedelics disengage the compartmentalized mind, and whatever rut people were stuck in, they, after having an experience of this, they will see a new possibility, and then it will be up to them to follow up on that and unstuck themselves from whatever undesirable behavior they might have been engaged in.
Yes, I do like that. People unstick yourselves, because I can speak from experience. And I'm sure, you had your experience as well, as we talked briefly, offline. And, I guess one thing that I want people to really understand here is that, thousands of years ago and times before, before we even had science, people had other ways and means to heal the body, to trust in the source, to trust in the energy, to trust that everything was being taken care of. And so now, moving into a world filled with science and technology, we're moving away from the basics. And as Carl as you have explained here, as he talked about, the science is just evidence of what the human brain, the intuitive human, has known all along, that these substances, this medicine, has always been here to help us and to not only heal us mentally and psychologically and physically, but also open us up to a greater connection to the source, to the energy, to the God, to the creator, to the universe that is, and to release this separation and for us to come together in oneness. I mean, just based on everything, wouldn't you, and us talking today, wouldn't you agree that that's the main purpose of the psychedelics?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah, and it's phenomenal, and I really appreciate you doing the work and the research, because I tell you, reading this is really insightful in the science and how people have really put it all together and really allowed for this material to be seen in this light. For those who've ever doubted the use or don't understand the use of these plants that have been around longer than we have as a species. And so, Carl, where can people find out more about you and about your book, The Quantum Science Behind Psychedelics?
Well, I just encourage people to buy the book, and it's not really just because I may gain a little bit of money from it. It's the reason is that what we can cover in an interview like this, Hillis and I, it becomes very philosophical. We're going into the deep conclusions, so to speak. But if you want to really know that this is true, that this is based on a tremendous amount of factual information and deep thought theories, you will have to read the book. And this particular book, I think, is probably the most comprehensive one I have written. I have written other books as well, like The 9 Waves of Creation, which came in 2016, I think. The Global Mind, The Rise of Civilization, also in 2016. And there are earlier books of mine, like the Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness. And they cover different topics or emphasize different topics. In this particular case, I've used macrocosmic quantum theory in order to address the whole issue of where does the psychedelic state come from? How could it be that if you take a certain substance that you travel to a different world? That's not really that's not what you taught in school, so to speak.
No,
and, no, you're not taught in school. No, because it doesn't fit the overall worldview. And all these books are available from Amazon.com, for instance. That's usually the easiest, but Barnes & Noble have them. You can go directly to my publisher, Inner Traditions, and then I have a website, Calleman.com, which has a blog and a range of different articles. Calleman.com, and there are a couple of Facebook pages. Quantum Science of Psychedelics is the name of the book, and there is also a Facebook page for that particular book. So all of these things may serve the one that wants to go further, and especially for those that are sort of interested. Some people they're happy with just having this kind of an out of the world experience that they might get from the use of some plant medicine or so. But in this case, it's especially for those that want to understand a little bit more when they come back to their default state and get a big perspective of it, that we're truly cosmic beings. And even if we live on this particular planet, we happen to land there, so to speak, but we are truly cosmic beings and related to the cosmic source. And that's what we need to develop.
Yes. So everyone, go out and purchase this book, and I will tell you that it is definitely not a light read. It's an informative one. So if you are looking to really understand the science behind the psychedelics and why it affects the mind and the energy, the brain that surrounds us and that represents us, definitely go out and purchase this. It is one that is very insightful. And Carl, thank you so much for being on Light Insight today, and thank you for diving in a little bit deeper, because we just jumped right on in, didn't we?
Thank you very much, Hillis, for having me. Thank you again.
And I look forward to definitely having you on again, because there's still so much that I didn't even get to, and I haven't even, it's so much. It's just so much that I want to talk about. So, yeah, definitely I want to connect with you again, and I'm sure the listeners will as well. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised, but heard instead, dear listeners, through podcast radio on realrevolutionradio.com. Never before has inspirational podcast radio been taken to this next level of wow. Until now. Today, in the age of information, more and more people are searching for answers and in solutions and how to better approach and perceive every day-to-day concerns by tuning in to realrevolutionradio.com. Isn't it about time we take back our lives, back in consciousness, in a higher state of awareness, in the evolution of our own state of higher well-being? Yes, we can do so consciously every day by tuning in to the many groundbreaking and third eye-opening podcasts. Our new Cleveland-based network of over 33 paradigm-shifting internet talk shows. Only on realrevolutionradio.com. Be part of that change. Evolve. Be inspired.